It's now time for our second panel with a very interesting subject, that of the global tax developments and the impact of tax changes in European Union business. I now welcome Mr. Kyriakos Iordanou, General Manager of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Cyprus, who will be the moderator of this panel, to take the floor and welcome the panelists. Mr. Iordanou.
Kalimera σας. Good morning. First, let me invite to the stage the rest of the panelists. Mr. Mavraganis, please come on stage. Mrs. Katerina Perrou, Mr. Christos Theofilou, and Mrs. Maria Sarantopoulou. Please join me at the panel. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to the discussion of our panel. As a brief introduction, some lessons that we have learned during the past couple of years include that the business and the economic foundations of any country can be affected by events happening elsewhere in the world. Geographical boundaries are becoming less and less relevant since economies are open and susceptible to impacts of globalization. Energy resources and energy costs are playing a massive and catalytic role in the economic activity and the social framework in every country. Competitiveness is fundamental for every country's economic growth model, whilst robust and sustainable fiscal policies are also mandatory. Concentration and focus on ESG, with everything relating to the preservation of the environment, the natural resources, sustainable development goals of the UN, is probably the way forward. Hence, the international business and economic scenery are volatile and quite liquid, I must say. Currently, many initiatives instigated by various organizations, including the European Union, are underway which affect the international tax outlook. These initiatives place particular emphasis on the combat against aggressive tax planning, tax evasion, and profit shifting, on enhancing compliance, reporting, and transparency, as well as on efforts to address digital business and technology, substance rules, as well as ESG priorities. Then discussions around the Unshelled Directive, foreign direct investment screening, the ultimate beneficial owners, and their registers, BEFITs, Pillar 2, transfer pricing, anti-avoidance regulations, country-by-country reporting, DAC 6, 7, 8, and many more, not to mention everything, create indeed a very complex puzzle, let alone that we also got the state aid rules for the European Union. Apparently, and we see it happening, every jurisdiction is now trying to secure their own fair share, as they perceive it, of tax revenues. The European Union is championing in the efforts to harmonize tax legislation and practices across the member states by issuing various directives and regulations. Yet, this is a question that will be addressed to the panel later on, is the Union indeed enhancing its competitiveness vis-à-vis the rest of the business world? Is it merely trying to control the internal market game, thus putting its businesses and economies of the member states in a handicap versus the rest of the world? We'll see that in a moment. To unfold the thread of the above and have an open discussion, I have the pleasure to be joined on stage by a prominent team of speakers with Mr. Dr. Mavraganis, Mrs. Perrou, Mr. Theofilou, and Mrs. Sarantopoulou. So starting the discussion, I would like to convey the question to everybody and have your brief initial thought on the subject matter of our discussion, that is the global tax developments and whether they affect Europe and its competitiveness. Dr. Mavraganis, let's start with you.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation, and it's my pleasure to be here with all these attendees and speakers. I think that the most important issues at OECD or EU level for the time being is the minimum tax directive, the directive on joint audits, the UNCEL directive ADIT 3, the OECD multinational convention on taxation for excessive profits for multinationals, which has been finalized last July, and it has to be ratified at least by 30 countries in order to put into force. And last but not least, it's the global trend of incentives, and especially the incentives offered by the US and China. They have been covered under the green environment dress, let's say. And on the other hand, European Union has tried last February, if I can recall, to set the principles of a new regime that will relax some of the state aid rules regarding some investments, in particular in the area of energy and green economy. My main conclusion is that the European Union lacks very much of effective measures, and it is very slow in trying to provide a very efficient framework compared with the other two countries. And there is a tension between large European countries and smaller European countries, because if we don't have a major reorganization of the incentives and state aid rules, then those rules that will remain will be in favor of the large countries, and small countries have a problem with this. The European Union, as in other fields, has to be more efficient and must be more speedy in taking the right measures. Otherwise, major companies will move to US, to China, and we will lose investments, and of course, we will lose revenues.
Thank you, Dr. Mavraganis. I think you painted an initial picture that will facilitate the discussion later on. Mrs. Perrou, your initial thoughts on our subject matter.
Good morning, first of all. Thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here among this group of professionals. Regarding the main topic, I will agree with what Dr. Mavraganis has already said. I would also like to add a more general picture to see where we are. And if we look at the global tax players, main tax players, we can identify 5 major tax players. So that would be China, India, the US, the European Union, and the African Union. And this is where we are now, and this is where we should view the position, how the European Union is doing in this environment. Are we, as a union, competitive enough in relation to the other tax players at the tax level? It is something that it is under discussion. The issue of incentives that Dr. Mavraganis already said plays a very crucial role in that, let's say, competition between those players. And in that picture, let me just add the twin challenge that we face, particularly in the European Union, digitalization on the one side and demographics on the other side. It is no secret that the population of Europe is diminishing, it is aging, and this affects tax revenue. That means that in the near future, we will need to look how to differentiate our tax mix in order to keep it sustainable, in order also to be able to keep the level of living, the status, the social welfare state in Europe at the levels that we have or that the previous generations had. So these are the two challenges that on the one side call for more taxes, higher taxes in order to be able to cover that gap, but on the other side, looking at the competitiveness. So higher taxation, going towards a higher taxation would mean losing on the competitiveness side. Going to the competitiveness side may mean that we have to do with less taxes. There are several initiatives at the level of the European Union, again, with the aim of, at this point, increasing competitiveness. It is something that we have to assess. We are not sure if these are indeed to that direction entirely. I think we will have the opportunity to say more in the discussion.
Yeah, most probably the initiatives will try to increase compliance, I would say, rather than competitiveness.
Yes.
Mr. Theofilou, your thoughts?
First, let me thank Delphi for inviting us to this excellent event and wish Christos' dream to be a success in the next decade. And thank you for the invitation of the panel. Let me rephrase a bit the word competition. Is a very light word. I will say this is a tax war. And why I'm saying this, because all countries, we have a tax war right now for the last 10 or 20 years. We had a tax war in the past, but now because countries don't have money, the tax competition is now a tax war. And why we have this tax war is because countries impose policy in two ways. So the one way is with direct investments, and the other way is with indirect subsidies, which is tax incentives. Traditionally, the tax incentives from a policy perspective, the spillover effect is greater than direct incentives. So countries tend to rely on tax incentives more than direct subsidies. And for this reason, all the countries around the globe who have seen corporate rates, tax rates going down, 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 and we have seen a lot of countries innovating on choosing various tax incentives. And we're going to see this, it will never stop. I like the words that you use, Kyriakos, and let me give the practical aspect of those words. So we have a war here, a tax war, actually. The tax planning that Kyriakos used, a very nice word, but now in practice, with this massive legislation that we have seen in the last 10 years of the BEPS project, all the clients in practice, their first concern is not actually tax planning, but tax planning has been transformed right now and is called correct tax compliance. So their biggest concern is to get their taxes right, make their investments, and pay their taxes and not pay higher taxes than they're supposed to pay, because they have all these massive anti-avoidance provisions that they need to comply with. So tax planning has been changing for the last decade. And also, Kyriakos used the word profit shifting. Now, if the BEPS project proves to be a success, which is partly a success, that's why we have BEPS 2. The reason we have BEPS 2 is because BEPS 1 was a partial success. It's obvious. If it is proved to be a success, and we're going to discuss this later on, I will say the profit shifting will be cease to exist. And for the same reason, Kyriakos used the word tax evasion. I think the opinion today of the EU is that there is no tax evasion with the implementation of the global minimum tax, the so-called Pillar 2, and the transparency initiatives. So for the tax evasion will be minimized. And closing my initial discussion is that Kyriakos correctly mentioned that the EU is a champion on this. Whether we are lucky or not, we don't know, but there is a reason that the EU is a champion is because the EU is a supranational organization, meaning that it can impose policy, whereas the OECD is an international organization, so they need to be more relaxed in order to find consensus. Whereas on the other hand, we see the US, which they always play on their own. They never sign multilateral instruments in terms of tax. They are always ahead of it. We have seen this in FATCA. They have made FATCA, but they haven't joined CRS. Everybody exchanges information apart from the US. We have the MLI. The MLI was invented by the US mainly, but they have never signed it. The Vienna Convention is the same. So the US always plays a dominant role, but they never join multilateral for the reason that they don't want to give up their jurisdiction and impose their tax incentives as they wish. And the same will happen with Pillar 2. This is the reason that we don't have agreement for Pillar 1. So everything starts from the tax incentives because countries need to raise money, they need to raise growth, and everything else comes along.
Thank you, Christos. Mrs. Sarantopoulou, your comment in this discussion.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and for the invitation to be part of the panel. Over-regulation is a nowadays problem. It may lead to extensive taxation. And it creates also more cost for the companies to face all these regulation with consultants. At the end, I think that extensive taxation could lead companies to weakness. And finally, they could also kill. So we need the international organizations and the national legislatures to be more efficient in regulating and not over-regulating. I agree with all our speakers, of course, and I cannot agree more with them.
Thank you. So let's go a bit more focused now, and I'd like to ask Mrs. Perrou. Well, we've mentioned a lot of acronyms before. Let's stay a bit more focused on the main initiatives, and I'm referring mainly to BEFIT and to ADIT 3, or the Unshelled Directive, or whatever you like it. At least for us in Cyprus, and as an institute, we have written through the consultation process the Transparency Register of the EU with our comments. Don't agree. We think that there are in place other measures in place. So just explain to us what BEFIT wishes to purpose to impose, and the thought behind the Unshelled Directive, with substance, etc., and so forth.
That is a very good comment that you made about all the acronyms. I think there must be someone in the Commission thinking of how they should promote. They would promote more, or they would sell, yes, more easily whatever rules they're coming out. But apart from that, BEFIT is an initiative. First of all, it means Business in Europe, BE. Framework for Income Taxation, BEFIT.
Can I just comment here that it's the development of another acronym, CCTB and CCCTB.
And we will get to that exactly now. So business in this BEFIT proposal, although it is presented as a new one, it was presented on the 12th of September, so about 2 months ago. It is not, in fact, a new one. It is, again, the Commission putting forward one of the most optimistic projects that they have, I would say, since the 60s. And that project is to be able to agree at some point at a common corporate income tax base. That is the aim. The idea behind it is, of course, that when you have a large company, because this is addressed to large groups.
Correct.
We have a targeted directive proposal for small and medium enterprises. So we also have to look at that group of companies. But first of all, for large groups, that when they have to deal with 27 different tax systems and tax rules and filing 27 different tax returns, what in the Commission's jargon is called the tax spaghetti, we don't get very far. It's much too complicated for a company to be competitive at the international level, the one that I described earlier, when you have to compete with companies from China, India, US, or now the African Union, that they have, not yet the African Union because they follow the steps of the European Union, but in companies coming from the other countries, they have to deal with more or less one system, homogeneous. So that is the basic idea behind it. Try to help those companies deal with one, so minimize compliance, minimize all this fuss with dealing with taxes, and try to have that as one. Again, as Kyriakos mentioned, this is not new. The Commission has attempted at least 2 times before, in 2011 and 2016, with 2 proposals on this common corporate income tax base. It has not been successful. The reason for that, we can think of a number of reasons. First of all, let's not forget that for direct tax measures, we need unanimity in the EU. And that is now a discussion that is starting at the Union, that maybe we do not need or we do not want unanimity anymore, and maybe we should change to majority. That would need, of course, a change of the treaties, and it is not obvious that this can happen. But again, by stealth, we may see direct tax measures being approved. 2011-2016 proposals were not successful. I will be a little bit pessimistic here. I think that the same reasons that did not allow the previous proposals to be accepted.
The same stuff, yeah.
Yes, will also apply for this one. For example, when you look at the particular proposals, and one of the issues, a major issue, is cross-border loss relief. I still do not see which country would be happy to provide relief for the losses that a company has made in another member state. I don't think we are there yet. So I do see a lot of elements that would not allow member states as yet to agree on that. Other than that, transfer pricing compliance and make it easier through the application of the system, that would be a good point, a good development, as well as abolishing withholding taxes between the constituent entities of groups in the EU area, as well as the approach on administrative, approach, having one-stop shop, actually, so that a company, a group, does not have to do with separate different tax authorities and filing obligations, but just one place where you can do that, and then member states shall exchange information. So there are benefits, there are things that we see that could help those large multinational European multinational groups to be more competitive, I think that the political environment is not yet ready.
And what about unshelled?
The unshelled directive. Now, I will not go into detail about that because from what I understand, this is not going forward. So it's not moving.
It has been stalled, it's
yes.
true.
It's not moving. The reason, the idea behind unshelled directive is to provide rules and, of course, consequences in case companies do not pass the test, rules to add more substance. So the criteria that are proposed are those that would add or prove that the company has substance so that it is a real taxpayer, a real entrepreneur that is indeed entitled to all those benefits that the tax system has to offer. And in case this is not, then we should not allow them access to the treaty benefits, for example, and a number of other consequences. As an idea, okay, I would say it has a good starting point because what we are trying to do here is to really protect now competition between companies so that only those that really have doing business are protected or are able to access the various tax benefits that are offered and not those that pretend to be something that they are not. Fine. Again, I have heard a lot of criticism also from the academia on the proposal on whether that would be acceptable within the European Union and the fundamental freedoms, compatible with the fundamental freedoms. But what I hear as a blocking factor at this point is that there are some member states that would like to see stricter rules in the directive, so they in the proposal. So they think that it is too soft.
Well, that's their idea, if I may comment. Yes. One of the reasons that didn't progress is that there is a conflict between the Parliament and the Commission, with the Parliament asking for harder measures, possibly going a bit to more popularistic measures, I would say.
Also,
I agree that substance should be established, yet the definition of an unshelled company, let's put it like that, it's not difficult to be implemented, especially in the smaller states. And of course, as what you mentioned before about BEFID and CCTB, we have the hurdle, in inverted commas, of the principle of subsidiarity and the sovereignty of each country, as you mentioned, is included in the treaties. So yes, it's a difficult discussion. Christos, do you have something to add in this discussion, adding with your comments with what BEPS initiatives also cover here?
Yes. It's a very interesting question, actually, Kyriakos. And the reason is that we see this in practice, that the EU is imposing policy stricter than anyone else. And we see this from BEFID and ADIT because both of them are EU initiatives and are not included in the BEPS project, and not in BEPS 1, not in BEPS 2. So the OECD comes here and says, we have BEPS 1, 15 steps, we partly solve the problem, and we have now Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 to solve the problem internationally. This is what the OECD says. And surprisingly, the EU says, we need to have BEFID and ADIT on top to solve the problem. So how they will solve the problem with these two is peculiar. And to answer your first question, whether there is a benefit, for sure there is a benefit for tax advisors. We'll have work to do. I don't know if there is a benefit for the taxpayers. Time will show. If we're alive, we're going to see this. But both of the initiatives, I agree with Katerina, that there is not much support within the EU. So I'm not quite sure whether they will go to be agreed. The EU is not that very keen on both of them, actually, and there are reasons for that.
In the same framework, how about Pillar 2 and the tax on multinationals with excess of 750 million? Would contribute to this discussion, or would it render discussions on common tax basis a bit less relevant?
Actually, Pillar 2 is the biggest headache right now for all multinationals because this is approved by the EU and the other member states around the globe. So there is a global minimum tax right now. All countries around the world, they have an additional income tax law on top of their law in order to make a calculation. And now all clients are worrying because all of them from 2024, they have a hidden tax liability in their financial statements that they need to make the calculations. Proactively, our clients are doing an impact assessment to calculate what is this tax liability, which is in my financial statements that I need to pay for the next year, and not just for low tax jurisdictions like Cyprus, but other jurisdictions. You may end up, let's say, for example, in Greece or other countries that your headline tax rate is higher than your on the 15%. With the tax incentives, you may end up paying lower than the 15%, and there will be top-up tax. So the biggest concern of multinationals right now is to try to understand what will be the hidden tax liability in the financial statements around the globe. And this comes from the fact that the reason of Pillar 2, why we have Pillar 2, is to solve all the problems not resolved in the BEPS project, leaving aside the digital economy. And effectively, to sum it up, in practice, two tax planning issues are left unsolved. The one is the CFC issue, and the other one is transfer pricing. And Pillar 2 is popping in to solve these two problems, international tax, because the issue, the profit shifting issue is there. And what is the aim? The aim is to tax all the big multinationals at the rate of 15 effective tax rate whenever they are headquartered. So it doesn't really matter where you are doing business, you will pay 15%. And in this way, they want to stop the race of the bottom that all the countries are doing in order to increase growth, create business, create revenues, decrease unemployment. They're doing it through tax incentives. However, this competition, and that's why I'm saying we have a tax war, it strives to the bottom the tax revenues of all countries, and effectively they want to stop this. Whether this will be a success is a good question.
Could I ask Dr. Mavraganis to comment on the discussion we had here so far, how that impacts Greece, for instance, since Greece has been open now for international investments with a lot of projects underway, leaving aside for the time being the incentives, all this additional burden on the multinationals that will come to Greece and invest their good money?
Well, allow me to say a few words as a comment from the discussion, very interesting discussion I had before. In the European Union, we have this stagnation of measures or delays because we have made an economic union instead of an internal market, which was the initial target. And we have realized that if you want to have a union, then you must increase democratic accountability, and you must make a final choice. Either you stay at the stage of the internal market, or you go further to a federation. If you don't become a federation, then we have all these internal disagreements. We have the national interests which prevail over the common objective, let's say, and that's why we have to see it under this, through this way. I mean, if the European Union does not transform. If the people of Europe want to be transformed in a real union, in a real federation as other states, Germany, US, many states, then we will face these delays and these problems not only in the economic sector, but in political sector, in the international scheme. Now, I'm coming to your question. Greece is in a very good position now. We have changed a lot. We have changed more or less the entire tax system. We have digitalized the tax system. We offer many opportunities to international investors, and we try to make their life and their investment easier. Of course, there are certain problems which the authorities and the state in general try to deal with, but the conclusion is that Greece offers a very good environment for investments, and the tax system has very much assisted to this objective. So far, Greece provides some incentives, and the last years, the incentives that are provided are in line with the guidelines of the European Union regarding state aid. Just to remind that a state aid has the criteria, should meet the criteria in order to be classified as state aid: grant of an economic advantage, financed by a state or throughout state resources. It must be selective, favoring some undertakings or products. It should distort competition and affect the trade between member states. So what Greece tries to introduce as tax incentives in the last years is in line with the framework set by the European Union, and that's why our incentives have to do with the selection of Greece as a tax residence for family offices, for high net worth individuals. Another set of incentive tries to gather research and studies to be carried out within Greece, either from large companies or from special centers. And we also have very much a very, I would say, large section of green economy incentives. For instance, for electric cars, for infrastructure to support electric cars, investments to move the mixture of energy producers, I mean from transfer, yes, from oil, from other coal, of course, to other very friendly to the environment sources like wind or solar. And all these are in line with state aid principles and legislation the European Union has adopted so far. The problem is that, as I previously said, there is a competition between major countries or group of countries globally, and therefore the European Union must look at the state aid and the incentives which should not be characterized as state aid in order to be competitive towards at least China and the United States. Otherwise, we will lose funds, we will lose businesses, and the result will be that the people of Europe will suffer from this reduction of output within the European Union.
Thank you, Dr. Mavraganis. Christos, back to you. just give us well, a brief analysis on the usefulness of transfer pricing, especially within the context we discussed before, and how does this help? Does this help in the fairer, let's say, competition, not using the word war now, between the countries, and of course, because it's also included more or less in the BEFIT within the EU.
Actually, as mentioned before, the transfer pricing is one of the biggest problems in international tax right now. The reason is because taxpayers, via transfer pricing planning, they can move their profits in the jurisdictions that they would like to be taxed. So maybe this is considered very plain and very easy, but this is what it is. So countries that don't like this, so they are trying to solve this problem. I will say the introduction of this new draft bill that is coming by the EU is not actually to solve this problem. The reason that they have this is mainly twofold. First of all, now we have seen the EU, because they have imposed an enormous tax compliance burden into the shoulders of the taxpayers, they are trying to provide some directives in order to relax this compliance burden, like the BEFIT. Okay, this is what they are saying. It doesn't mean that this is correct, but the legal reasons that they are providing in order to get unanimity is to relax the compliance burden. So this is what they are saying. However, they also want to have these rules in order, of course, to harmonize the rules within the EU, in order to stop losing EU cases within the EU jurisprudence, because the arm's length principle is not embedded in the EU law. However, the biggest issue, because all the countries within the EU, the majority of them, only a few right now, they don't have transfer pricing rules, and those few, they have announced that they will introduce transfer pricing rules, like Malta recently and so forth. What is the biggest issue of these countries is that because all of them, they follow the transfer pricing guidelines, which is mainly the same as the directive, the big difference, and the taxpayers should be careful, is that the scoping rules are different. So the personal scope of the directive, it covers both natural and legal persons, whereas in some countries these might be restricted. And it also covers the threshold of preparing a study is lower than many countries. So they have the 25%. I think Greece has a higher, 33. Katerina knows much better than me. So again, the threshold goes down. It means you have more taxpayer in scope, and it also includes a control test within the directive that many countries do not have this control test, like Cyprus. So this means that a lot of countries, they might have issues like, we don't prepare transfer pricing our domestic law, but we need to prepare transfer pricing under our new EU domestic law, because again, it's domestic law. However, the EU feels that it will solve this problem, but as Katerina mentioned earlier, the actual profit shifting transfer pricing problem, it will be solved via the BEFIT if eventually it comes into play, or via the Pillar 2 project if this is a case.
Okay. Anyway, the European Commission left it at each member state to decide thresholds for each type of activity that needs to be under transfer pricing and the ceilings there. Mrs. Perrou, earlier you mentioned that again, we're going around the BEFIT framework. It's included the option to select a single jurisdiction, then allocate profits taxes to the other countries, which combines with the latest development from the European Commission, a very hot development, the head office tax system for SMEs, acronym as HOT. Just give us your insights on this, and how would that effectively work? Well, it's a question mark, isn't it?
It is. First of all, I would like to meet the person who came up with the acronym.
It's a very cold guy, most
Hot,
probably.
a very cool guy. Yes. Head Office Taxation, that is the acronym that we are talking about, HOT. So this is another element of the BEFIT proposal, the September proposal of the Commission. This is now addressed to small, medium enterprises that are active in more than one member states through permanent establishments, not subsidiaries. So the aim or the idea behind it is to provide something for those companies that are still in their early stages of expansion outside one member state. They have not reached yet a size that would classify them as a large group, but still let's help them somehow, again, on the level of administrative burden and compliance with the different tax systems of the member states. So this is, the proposal here is that the permanent establishments, so the company may choose, may opt, optional, to be subject to only one set of rules, that of the head office state. As I said, this would apply only for companies that have permanent establishments in other member states, not subsidiaries. If they have subsidiaries, they will be immediately out of the scope of this directive. And for those that would opt to be subject to these rules, that means that the taxes, the taxable base and the taxes will be calculated at the level of the head office state. And again, we have the same idea that only one tax return will be filed at the head office tax administration. They will be responsible for sharing that with the other member states where the permanent establishments are situated, and also responsible for transmitting the revenue to the other states. I don't have any indication of how this will go.
Well, it's a
Likewise, because what we see in practice that usually Ps are used by banks, insurance, and this type of outside sectors, the plan.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what would be the usefulness for small enterprise? I don't.
It is not obvious. Yeah. It is not obvious indeed.
Yeah. So maybe it's a combination of CPCR with VAT-TVS at the end of the day. Anyway, yeah, it also ties with the SMEs relief package announced by the European Commission last month. So apparently there is a need to support SMEs. Going now to Dr. Mavraganis once again. You mentioned earlier your opening at intervention about the EU tax, China, the US, and their incentive schemes. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes. The US and China have started offering certain incentives, and they are, especially in the US, undercover incentives based, as they say, on boosting green economy and environmentally friendly investments. But let's be frank, they are incentives to gather investments and to attract the large companies. And the same is done at least by China, perhaps from India. I don't know about India, so in depth, but China does it. And in February, the European Union announced that they will start revisiting some of the state aid rules, especially relaxing the investments on energy and investments which are friendly for the environment. The problem is that these investments are are made especially by large European countries of the European Union, and there are some strong rejections or resistance from smaller European countries, and not only countries of the south of Europe. These agreements, of course, will delay coordinated policy to relax state aid and introduce some rules that will attract the investments in Europe as well, which means that, again, US and China will be ahead of Europe and will attract investments more quickly than Europe, which will have a negative impact on the European Union again. What's the conclusion? The conclusion is, again, that the European Union should act very quickly, coordinated, and the Commission and the other organs of the European Union must be very quick at reaction, and the leaders of the European Union states should focus on those measures so as to be decided, adopted, and implemented very quickly. Otherwise, the other two countries will attract investments, and nobody will remain in Europe for attracting its investment.
Oh, that's a big risk, Dr. Mavraganis. And allow me now to move on to Mrs. Sarantopoulou, since we're talking on incentives. What are the incentives offered by the Greek state, especially relating to the golden visa benefits and so forth, so that we can conclude the discussion on the incentive side?
The Greek government has not only given incentives to the companies to invest in Greece, but also to international individuals, especially to non-EU individuals. To non-EU individuals, and this has been given through the Golden Visa scheme. Golden Visa is a residence permit which the non-EU resident can obtain by investing €250,000 in real estate property. The Golden Visa scheme has been launched in 2013 and established in 2014 through the Migration Code. This code has been amended several times due to the developments through these years, COVID and etc., and facilitated the non-EU residents to get the Golden Visa easier. And in 1st of April of this year, to 2023, we had a major change in the Golden Visa scheme through the publication of a new migration code, which will be in effect as of the 1st of January 2024. This major change is the increase of the investment in real estate property from 250,000 to 500,000 euro in certain areas in Greece, which are considered as prime areas, or areas where the non-EU investors these places were more favorable for them to invest and live. In Greece, over these years, there have been a very huge interest in golden visa and in the purchase of real estate property. In September 2023, according to the statistics of our Ministry of Migration, the total permanent investor residence permits amount to 37,631. This number is a total number of residence permits issued until now, which include the investor residence permit, their family members, and the renewals of the investor residence permit and their family members as well. Due to the change of the threshold of the minimum investment in Greece, there has been a boost the last 9 months in interest of applying for golden visa and buying real estate property in Greece. There has been an increase by 163% compared to the previous 9 months period of 2022. And also, there has been an increase due to this interest by 120% for the issued permanent investor residence permit. The top 10 nationalities which are opting for the Greek golden visa are the following. China is on the first range by 61% of the total of the golden visas issued. The second country is Turkey, which is interested in the Greek golden visa. Lebanon, Iran, United Kingdom, Russia, Egypt, USA, Israel, and Ukraine are following. Why Greek golden visa is so attractive? Because it gives to the non-EU residents a permanent stay in Greece. This means that as long as they have the real estate property in Greece, they also are entitled to the golden visa and to stay in Greece as long as they wish. They have the right to travel visa-free to all Schengen countries. They choose Greece because it is a very nice and sunny place to live. And of course, there are a lot of real estate and other investment opportunities. The real estate market, although it is, there is a stable upward increase in the prices, it is still competitive to other European countries and cities. The Greek government also provides for tax incentives to foreign citizens to come to Greece to stay, to change their tax residency and to enjoy the permanent residence permit. There is no minimum stay in Greece for the holders of the Greek golden visa. The non-EU residents investors have the possibility also to rent their property. And most of them choose also Greece because of the good level of education and cheap for them private schools, because outside it is really more expensive to go to a private school. Greece has political stability the last 8 years. Yes, and after really living in Greece, after 7 years staying in Greece, the non-EU residents are eligible to apply for citizenship. And so the requirements in order to get as a non-EU investor the golden visa is to invest €250,000 or 500,000 euro in a real estate property, or in a 10-year time-sharing contract of a minimum value of the same minimum value, or a 10-year lease of hotel accommodation or furnished tourist accommodation. The minimum value of 500,000 euro is applicable to areas like north, central, and south of Athens, Voula Varivouliagmeni, the southern sea coast of Attica, Thessaloniki, and the islands of Mykonos and Santorini. The Golden Visa Scheme gives to the non-EU residents the opportunity to bring also their family members with them to Greece, their spouses, their children until 21 years old, and until 21 years old, as well as the parents, they have no rights to access to labor market. Here are the documents which are required for applying for the Golden Visa. And apart from the Golden Visa through investment in real estate, there are also other Golden Visa schemes through which the non-EU resident can get the residence permit in Greece. For example, through investment of 400,000 euro in fixed-term deposit, in capital contribution in listed companies, in capital contribution in real estate investment companies, in purchase of Greek bond loans, and invest in the mutual funds.
That's it. Well, I think it's a very interesting list of criteria and of benefits that the discussion ties with what we've said earlier. In order to sum up the panel, and conscious of the time, I would say, using Christos' word before, that we did live in a fierce trade and tax warfare, with every country trying to grasp as much as resources, political influence, and revenues, of course. We also highlighted how the European Union, if not addressing the issues a bit more quickly and more related with the rest of the world rather than the internal market only, could lag behind. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Oxon.
Thank you, Mr. Iordanou, Dr. Mavraganis, Ms. Perrou, Mr. Theofilou, and Ms. Sarantopoulou for a very enlightening panel.